Welcome everybody to day 3 on doing the will of the Father. And yesterday we laid the groundwork, right, about the first law of heaven, and that doing the will of the Father is the highest form of living the law of obedience. So today I want to talk about, it's a weird saying, but you're going to understand it in just a minute. But basically the statement is, I did what I was supposed to do. That's what I want to talk about today in relationship to the Savior and you and I. So let's talk a little bit about the issue in the war of heaven. Now, that's probably not a good phrase because it sounds like it's over. It's not, right? The issue in the war of heaven is just gotten transplanted down here to earth. The issue in heaven and the conflict in heaven was wrestling with this idea of agency. And we still are in much the same way are wrestling with the difficulties that come from moral agency. But moral agency is only going to be a blessing. Moral agency is only going to be a blessing, and the plan is only going to be good if we obey the will of our Father in heaven, of God. Agency kind of will be a disaster, right? I mean, this can be a hard thing to say, but and it was basically for a third of the host of heaven if we don't follow the will of our Father in heaven, right? Super important to think about the reality of moral agency and why it was given to us, right? It wasn't given us to do whatever we want. It was a gift from our Father in heaven so that we could choose Him, right? Now, we don't know very much about the premortal council in heaven. We do have some actual specific language in the conversation that happened and what came out of it about being faithful to our first estate, right? That we just studied this year as we start out the year studying the Old Testament, right? But we do know that the issue was agency and our Father's plan, right? The Savior Jesus followed it and obeyed it and took His part. Lucifer opposed it, and a third of the hosts rebelled. Right? The war was about agency, and agency only works advantageously if you're obedient. It only works. It only worked constructively for 2/3 of the hosts of heaven. Those who followed the will of the Savior, who followed the will of the Father, and who followed the teachings of the gospel of Jesus Christ. Now, obedience includes commandments. And as we've talked before in some of my other things, both general and personal, right? It includes all kinds of, I hope you've learned this, it includes all kinds of very specific obligations that they're only for you, right, in doing the will of the Father. And there's some theological significance to this, and there is divinity in it, and we're going to see in the life of the Savior, following the will of the Father is a fundamental. It is a fundamental, and as basic as anything. I said it as the Savior describes Himself. It's ascending in how He described Himself. Until that's how he described Himself, and I think He did it because that's really his message. But the reality is this: it's basic and it's fundamental to eternity, and to anything that everything that He did and everything that He said. And it's what He chose to say, literally, when He came to announce His divinity to the Nephites. Right? It's how He described Himself. The fact that He was the light and the life in the world was important, but the reality is there's this thing that I came to I can do nothing of myself. I came to do the will of the Father, right? So our Savior Jesus Christ has literally provided salvation and offered exaltation, and He's carried out His atoning sacrifice, and all of us are going to be resurrected in every moment and in every instance and application. Those great truths have their meaning because He suffered the will of the Father. Okay, I'm going to say that again. He's provided salvation, He's offered exaltation, He's carried out His atoning sacrifice, and we're all going to be resurrected. That's the reality. And in every moment, in every instance and application, those great truths basically have their meaning because he suffered the will of the Father and has always done so. There's power because there's power in him. There's power in those things because of who the Savior is. Basically, it's him saying, and to you and I did what I was supposed to do. I did what I was asked to do, so you and I could have everything else, so that we could receive all that the Father has. It's basically the Savior saying, I fulfilled the promises of the Father. Right? He's the mediator of the plan. So I have a question for you, and you might, well, that's not our responsibility, and I'm going to argue with you if you say that. Here's my question. Are we engaged in fulfilling the promises of the Father? Are you engaged in fulfilling the promises of the Father unto the children of men? Are we doing the will of the Father so that someday we can say the same thing? I did what I was supposed to do. I fulfilled the promises of the Father unto the children of men in my sphere of influence when I was sent, in the very time that I needed to do it. I think that's significant, especially in preparation for the second coming. And we're going to talk more about that. But I think that's the ground rule. I think that our Savior Jesus Christ was laying down with the Nephites, and I think it's the ground rule that is for you and I, and something that we literally have to consider as far as like, where are you at? Where am I at in relationship to this particular principle? What does it look like? How do I know? I mean, there's a bunch of questions we got to ask in order to see and figure out and be able to say, someday I did what I was supposed to do. Okay, we'll keep going tomorrow on our discussion about doing the will of the Father. Hope you're enjoying it. I hope you have a great day. Please like and subscribe. Send this to somebody. And thank you for being here. And we'll talk to you later.